WMG took my pants, and I loved it.
Word, WMG. Weapons Mask. Gaming Butchie on the mic. Butchie on the clicks. Playing that Sepultura pile. Checking in on Jeff Fargo. It's a good enough opening grip. I kind of like. I got Domain. I got some removal. Mortivore. Some bombs. But anyway, to continue the discussion from Tuesday, a bunch of you in the comments section brought up the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I thought that by Patrick Rothfuss. I feel like that would be a good discussion topic because there's a couple of unique things about the books that I would like to point out or bring up or discuss. And also, it's new, it's hot, it's popular. The new book, I believe the third book's called Stone Door, Door of Stone, something like that. Something to do with stones and doors. I believe it comes out in May. I've heard. I think that it's. I think the release date's out there, so I'm really looking forward to that. My buddy Ed Kim is the one who turned me on to the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I went and I bought the first book. I bought it in hardcover. I brought it home. I was about halfway through the book that I was reading at the time. And the Evil Empress, my girlfriend, picked it up and read it. She had just finished her book. She reads fantasy books too, but we read different fantasy. I like high fantasy and epic fantasy. She likes classical fantasy. Obviously, there's some crossover, and it's not completely separate because of all the subgenres of fantasy, those are the three main ones. But they do tend to blur and overlap at times, and you guys know this. So she read the first book in like 3 days. Like, she went to work tired like 2 days in a row because she stayed up all night reading the book. She was so hooked on it. So that was my first that was how I knew that it was good, because I really trust her opinion as much as anybody's out there. And I agree. I think it's great. I've read both two books. They're really difficult to put down. But what makes it interesting, what is interesting to me about the Kingkiller Chronicles, what makes them unique, first of all, is that it's written from a first-person perspective. Generally, in academia, the first-person voice is considered sophomoric. It's considered an immature writing style because it's the easiest writing style to do, because you can write from your own perspective, basically. Most, young aspiring authors, when they're, 15, 16 years old and they're writing their first stories for their English classes and whatnot, tend to write them in first person. And it's fine and good, but once you get to college, they frown upon it. It's, it's considered childish. It's not, as evidenced by the fact, if you look at all of your favorite fantasy books, or even outside the fantasy genre, books in general, just literature. There's not very many first-person narratives that have been considered classics. I mean, certainly there are some, and there's some great ones out there. I mean, you can name them if you want. I know several of them, but as a general rule, first-person narratives are very rare, because they're just they have tunnel vision. You can only go so far with them because you can't explore the other characters and what's in their head, but that's a whole different discussion. So when I got the book and I picked it up, and the first thing I start reading, it's in first person, I almost put it down because I hadn't read a first-person narrative in so long. I mean, I was only reading good books, and none of them, it wasn't because I was dodging a first-person perspective. It was just, the big popular ones weren't. And there's a reason for that. So I was put off by that at first. And of course I started reading it, and it doesn't take very long to get hooked by Quoth. It just doesn't. There's this line at the end of like the first chapter of the prologue where it's not a line, it's an amazing paragraph. I'd like to quote it for you, but it's not really necessary. Those of you who have read it know what I'm talking about, though I don't want to ruin it for those that haven't. But he just basically is getting ready to tell his story, and he says, I'm Quoth, I've done this, I've done that, blah, blah, blah. And he finishes it, I am Quoth, the Kingkiller. And it just really hooked me. It was a really cool paragraph, and it just basically lays out all the things that he did throughout his life. And he's going to tell the story. And I thought at the time, well, those are all interesting things. I would like to know how he came to this inn, how he got to where he is now with all of this stuff that happened in between. So the fact that the book is so good, it's so engrossing, and it's in the first person narrative makes it very unique. It makes it very special. I probably would have put it down if the Evil Empress had not been so engrossed in it. But so he proves that even though a lot of scholars out there, poo-poo the first-person perspective, with, a properly intelligent person can do it, with the right idea and the right drive and some good creativity, you can pull it off. It's very rare that it does, but Rothfuss has obviously got the skills because he did more than pull it off. I mean, it's excellent. One of the other anomalies about it that I think is really ironic is you can't you can't put it into a cubbyhole. You can't put it into a genre yet. I mean, it's fantasy genre, but you can't put it in any of the subgenres yet because the first 2 books I've read that they would be considered high fantasy. But the fact that he calls it the Kingkiller Chronicles rather than like the Kingkiller Trilogy or something else, duology, the fact that he calls it the Chronicles means he doesn't necessarily have a set amount of books that he's going to write for it. And some of the foreshadowing that has gone on makes it pretty clear that there are going to be some... Quoth is going to be involved in... world events, which will make it epic fantasy. He will have killing kings and such, right? So the inference is that it's going to be epic fantasy, but right now it's high fantasy. So it's interesting that it's going to start out as a high fantasy and then evolve into an epic fantasy as he grows and he gets more involved in world politics and relations and wars and yada, yada, yada. That wasn't my point, though. I mean, I got sidetracked there. That's an interesting thing. What my point was that I was saying that is really interesting to me. One of the ironic things about it is that this book, the 2 books are so interesting. They're one of those page turners. They're very difficult to put down. Very difficult to put down. They're just engrossing, but nothing happens. So how is it that these books are so interesting when nothing really happens? It's such an insular little world that Quoth lives in. It's just basically a kid going to mage school. Like one of you guys said in the comments section, it's like Harry Potter. Well, I don't like that comparison necessarily. I understand that comparison. I just don't necessarily care for it because they're different genres. Harry Potter's classical fantasy, and it. That fantasy, it mixes with our world. Any fantasy book that mixes with our world, the setting, when there's interaction with, quote, muggles, it changes it. It definitely makes it its own unique thing. So I don't want to compare it to Harry Potter in any of those respects because it's a different type of fantasy for sure. It's high fantasy. It's not classical fantasy. But the subscriber is completely right in that it's like Harry Potter, where it's basically a young man going off to school and growing up. It's a coming of age story as much as it is a fantasy book. You're watching Quoth, go through puberty and have his first love and his first adversary, his first antagonist, his educational experience. They're all things that we can relate to. But if you really look at it, nothing really significant happens. It's not action-packed. There are no world-changing events. There's no fucking prophecy. There's none of that shit. Really, well, I mean, okay, there's some little bits and pieces here and there, but they're hints as to the future. I'm just speaking specifically about these 2 books. It's just watching Quoth go to school. And, it's more like... The Harry Potter reference is more like Harry Potter goes to college, and Harry Potter's more like the kid going to Wizard High School. This is Wizard College, and it's a completely different magic system. And for those of you that might be thinking about reading the Kingkiller Chronicles, don't go into your head with some preconceived notion that's anything like Harry Potter, because it's nothing like it. The only comparison is that it's Wizard School. But I feel like this is more growing up wizard school. Harry Potter was, while it caught on with the adults, it was a young adult literature. It was written for and towards young adults. The fact that actual adults enjoyed it was, a cool byproduct and made, her a lot of money. This is written for adults. I could see it being young adult lit, but it's some of his thematics are pretty intricate and pretty tough to dig out, and I think only an adult's going to be able to do it. I don't think you have enough experiences as a child to do it. But as far as new fantasy goes, I really recommend the Kingkiller Chronicles. They're just very enjoyable. Quoth is very clever, smart, endearing character. I like Quoth. I like him a lot, and he's by no means flawless. He has his fatal flaw, like all good characters do. Rothfuss built a very rich and engrossing fantasy world. I like the world that he's built. It's different enough to be unique, but it's not so avant-garde that it's uncomfortable. I really enjoyed it. I'm really interested to see where he's going with it, because there isn't really much evolution outside of just Quoth himself. There's not a lot of plot evolution from book 1 to book 2. Like by the time you get to the end of book 1 and the end of book 2, there's not a lot of overarching plot that you've been, no more so in book 2 than 1. I mean, you get to the end of book 2 and you're like, all right, where's my overarching plot? What's Quoth's job in the world? Is he gonna save the world? What's he gonna do? Like there's a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of prescience, but there's not a lot of hardcore concrete facts, which is a good writing technique. It really holds my interest. I really want to see where he's going with it, and he hasn't given us so much information that you already know the path that he's going to take. It's interesting to me that, as an experienced reader, I've gotten to be pretty good at seeing where an author is going with his novels pretty early on in a book. And I usually figure them out. It's the best authors that fool me. The ones I like the most are the ones that trick me. So I'm very interested to see where he's going with it. I highly recommend it, especially with the third book coming out. And I feel like he's getting to a turning point. It looks like he's pretty much done with college and he's going to be going off into the world. If anything, if you can just go online and find the prologue in the first chapter, do so. Just read it, because I think that last paragraph that Quoth says when he's getting ready to tell his story, he recites this, this paragraph about, like a precursor to a story, and it hooked me. I thought it was really good. So yeah, I agree with all of you that put it in the comments that Kingkiller is the shit. I absolutely agree. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that for now. I'm really looking forward to the new book. I recommend Kingkiller. Quoth is a fucking cool dude, and it's a cool story, and it's kind of insular. And I think one of the reasons I like Quoth so much is this goes back to another comment. Several people put in the comments, asked if I had read Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden files. I have a 6-pack of them. Evil Empress bought me the first 6 books in the series. They're still in the saran wrap. I haven't even opened them up yet. I have every intention of reading them because Jim Butcher also wrote in the middle. He's been writing Harry Dresden, this real world pseudo sci-fi fantasy. Not sci-fi, it's fantasy, but it's basically a wizard PI in the real world, and it's interesting. I'm ashamed to say, now this is hypocritical. This is shitty of me to say. What I know of the Dresden Files is what I saw on the TV show. There was they had a TV show on Sci-Fi Channel. It only lasted 1 season before it got canceled. But I watched it because I was aware, while I haven't read the Dresden Files, I was aware of it because he wrote in the middle of he took a break from Harry Dresden, in the middle of that wrote the Codex Alera, which is a old school epic fantasy, quintet It's a 5-book series. Man, and I'm hoping that the Kingkiller Chronicles, this doesn't, what happened to me in Harry Potter is the same thing that happened to me in the Codex Alera, which is what I really hope does not happen in Quoth. Harry Potter, I loved the first few books when he was young and he was growing up and everything was still a mystery. But, once I got to, book 4 and 5, when he started getting older and it was all these real-world problems, I don't know what it was. I lost interest. The books lost some of their lightness and they became much darker, which in most cases I prefer. But for some reason with Harry Potter, I liked the funny, light, childish aspects of Harry Potter. Once it got grim and serious and everything, it didn't hold the same interest for me, and I faded away from Harry Potter. I didn't care for the last few books. I only read them just so I can know what happened without having to see the movie. The Codex Alera was the same thing. I read the first book and it was just so much fun. I loved the character Tavi. He's a classic young fantasy character, coming of age. Everyone else has these powers. They're called Furies. He's one of the few people that doesn't. It makes him an outcast, and he's got to find his place in the world, blah, blah, blah. First 3 books were amazing because of the innocence, because him trying to find his Tavi trying to find his way, and more particularly because everyone else had Furies and he didn't. He had to get out of sticky situations with cleverness. Since he didn't have magic and everyone else did, he had to use his brain. And the clever ways in which Jim Butcher got him out of situations was amazing to me. That's what I love about Jim Butcher. He's very clever, very clever. The guy is a smart writer. But the same thing happened once Tavi grew up and once he became a bigwig in their political arena. I still enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much. Once Tavi became kind of powerful, in charge, he got power, it wasn't, and he still needed to use his cleverness, and don't get me wrong, it was still good. If you're going to read the first one, you might as well read all 5. Those are page turners too. Those are quick reads. You can read those very quickly. But it was the same thing. The last couple books faded on me because it just didn't hold the same allure that the first couple did when things got really heavy and I love the heavy of George R. R. Martin. The fact there's so little lighthearted. I like the fact that there's very little lightheartedness in there, because when the comic relief does come, it is a relief and it does feel good. But there's just something about it, it faded away. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen with Quoth and the Kingkiller. I hope that once he grows up, I don't lose interest, because I fell in, I liked the character as he was as, a teenager. So, but, there's no telling with taste. I mean, you never know. I can't predict what I'm going to like, what I'm not going to like. There's so many series that started out amazing, and I thought I would love them as much all the way to the end. And, for various and sundry reasons, they faded away on me a little bit. But that doesn't happen that often. Most writers are pretty consistent. But, some writers, they get older, they develop drinking problems, they have relationship problems, and their writing, it affects their writing. You have to take that into account, You could tell Robert Jordan was getting old near the end. He just went on and on and on about nothing for books and books, just like old people do, It was a lot of fucking nonsensical shit, a lot of non-important shit, Brandon Sanderson saved that series. Oh, my God. That first book that Brandon Sanderson wrote after Robert Jordan died was, talk about revitalizing the series. It was like giving it a fucking Red Bull. All of a sudden it was back. It'd been real slow for about 10 years, It was a 22-year series. There was about 10 years that were amazing and 10 years that were kind of meh. And then Sanderson came along and just saved it. And speaking of Sanderson, boy, I'll tell you what, I have to say, better than even Kingkiller's The Way of Kings. Sanderson is writing his own uber big, gigantic, it's supposed to be a decalogy, 10 books, epic fantasy series, along the lines of A Wheel of Time. And the first book's called Way of Kings. There's only one book out. He's only halfway done writing the second one. I don't know I don't even remember the name of the series. I just call it the Shard Knight series. That's, I would have to say, as far as new books go that have come out, let's say in the last 3 years, I would say The Way of Kings is the best book I've read in the last 3 years. Yeah, I can say that with a surety. Yeah, in the last 3 years for sure. I can't think of anything that's eclipsed that. There's not many books that I finish and I turn right back to page 1 and start reading it over again. It was that good. That Brandon Sanderson has really grown into his own. He paid his dues. He polished up and finished off an iconic series. And now he's starting on his own. He paid his dues. He's wrote some little series here and there. He wrote the Elantris and the Mistborn and stuff. And those are all good, but not great like Way of Kings. That Shard Knight shit, just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. But I think I've blathered on too long. I think we're about ready to fucking wrap this video up. Yeah, that's all I got for today. I don't know. Next video I'll respond to your guys' comments. Your guys' comments about books just get my juices flowing, and they get me thinking. And goddamn, I don't know who the son of a bitch was who mentioned WMG Book Club in the comments section, but you son of a bitch. That's the best idea I've heard all fucking week. Holy shitballs. I was thinking about that all day at work today, about a WMG book club and how fucking amazing that could be. But that is a topic for another video. I'm out. Word say word, son.